Today, we're taking a deep dive into a place that is distinctly unfinished.
Hmm.
It's really less of a country and more like a massive open-air geological laboratory, a place where the Earth is quite literally still being built under your feet. We are talking, of course, about Iceland, a creative production brief for a cinematic audio experience called Iceland Through the Elements.
Yeah, that production brief is actually a goldmine because it doesn't just list facts, it scripts out the sensations of the landscape.
Yes.
It forces us to ask how these four elements, fire, ice, wind, light.
Let's start with the ground then, the fire. One of our sources calls it the architecture of creation. But before we get to the actual lava, we have to talk about why the island is even there in the first place. Because technically, it shouldn't be.
Geologically speaking, no, it shouldn't. Iceland is an anomaly. It's sitting directly on top of the mid-Atlantic ridge.
Which, I remember this from high school geography. It's the seam where the tectonic plates meet.
Well, not meet. They're breaking up. It's a divorce.
Oh, right.
You have the North American plate and the Eurasian plate, and they are pulling apart from each other. The data in the stack shows they separate at a rate of about 2 centimeters per year.
Which, in human terms, sounds like nothing. That's what? The speed your fingernails grow.
Roughly, yes.
Yeah.
But in geological terms, 2 centimeters a year is a tearing wound in the Earth's crust. It creates a vacuum.
And nature abhors a vacuum.
Exactly. So magma rises up from the mantle to fill it. That is why Iceland exists. It's basically the scar tissue from the Earth tearing itself apart.
And right now, that scar tissue is leaking. This is where the 2026 context gets really intense. I was reading through the timeline of eruptions in the notes, and there was this incredibly long gap.
A very long gap. For about 800 years, the Reykjanes Peninsula, that's the area right near Reykjavik and the international airport, it was completely dormant. It was quiet, you could build towns, you could build airports, and you felt safe because the fire was asleep.
And then 2021 happened.
The reawakening, that's what the geologists are calling it. We entered a totally new volcanic era. We saw the Fagradalsfjall eruptions, and more recently, the Sunnukagigar eruptions from 2023 through 2025.
So this is an ancient history. This is the current news cycle.
Exactly.
There was one detail in the production brief that actually made me anxious just reading it. It was about the speed of the lava.
Yeah, that stood out to me too.
Because I think we all have this movie idea of lava. It's this slow, red, oozing sludge. You can just briskly walk away from it while having a casual conversation.
Not this lava. The sources noted that during the recent eruptions, specifically the fissure eruptions, the lava was clocking speeds over 3 kilometers per hour.
Which doesn't sound like a race car, but on uneven ground in the dark.
That is fast enough to cut you off.
Oh.
You cannot just stroll away from it. It forces a kind of primal respect.
And it's not just the sight of it either. The travel blogs and the audio brief emphasize that the fire is something you smell.
Ah, the famous rotten egg perfume.
That's the sulfur dioxide, right?
Sulfur dioxide and hydrogen sulfide. It is pervasive. And here's a thing that catches visitors completely off guard. You cannot escape it, even inside your hotel room.
Right. One of the blogs mentioned someone freaking out because they thought the plumbing in their room was broken.
Because of the shower water.
Yes.
See, in Reykjavik, the hot tap water is geothermal.
Yes.
It is pumped straight out of the ground. It's perfectly safe to bathe in. It's actually very soft, mineral-rich water, great for your skin. But the guides are very explicit. Do not drink the hot tap water.
The cold water is fine.
The cold water is fresh spring water, some of the purest in the world. But the hot water, that is the smell of the volcano. You are showering in the heat of the mid-Atlantic ridge.
That is surprisingly intimate.
It connects you to the geology every single morning. You just can't ignore where you are.
The production brief had this great description of the sound of the geothermal areas, too, like Namafjall. It described them as natural amphitheaters.
I loved that section. It really focused on the audio texture of the place.
Yeah, it said the steam vents and mud pots sound like boiling gravy.
Boiling gravy is such a visceral image, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it captures the thickness perfectly. It's not just water boiling, it's mud. It's heavy. It's a constant reminder that the crust there is very, very thin. You are walking on a roof over a furnace.
So you have this intense heat, this violent creation, the smell of sulfur, but then you drive a few hours east and you hit the complete opposite. Chapter 2 of our deep dive, ice.
The archive of time.
I love that phrase from the sources. We transition from creation to preservation.
It really is preservation. Glaciers act like a time capsule. They trap air bubbles, dust, volcanic ash from thousands of years ago.
Right.
And in Iceland, Glaciers cover about 11% of the entire island.
And the big one is Vatnajökull.
Right, the largest ice cap in Europe.
By volume, yes. It's absolutely massive. But the real star of our source material here is Jökulsárlón.
The Glacier Lagoon. This is the place that's on every single Instagram feed.
It is, but for good reason. It's the deepest lake in Iceland, and it was completely carved out by the ice. You have these massive icebergs breaking off the glacier and just floating in the water.
Let's unpack the color of those icebergs, though, because that's what everyone notices first.
Yeah.
The blue.
It looks like blue Gatorade, frozen solid. It honestly looks fake. When I saw the photos in the source stack, I assumed they were photoshopped.
It does look artificial, but it is just physics in action. We tend to think ice is white because of the snow on top or because of the air inside.
Yeah.
But this ice, this has been at the bottom of a glacier for centuries.
So it's under an immense amount of pressure.
Incredible pressure. The weight of the snow on top squeezes out all the little air bubbles over time, becomes incredibly dense. Because there's no air left to scatter the light, the ice absorbs the red end of the light spectrum.
And it reflects the blue. So when you look at that blue ice, you aren't just looking at a pretty color. You're looking at density. You're looking at time itself.
Precisely. You're looking at ancient, high-pressure ice that fell as snow way before the Industrial Revolution.
Now, this is where the audio production brief really grabbed me, because we tend to think of ice as silent, frozen silence.
Right.
But the sources say that is completely wrong.
Completely. The Mainoy source we have, which specializes in natural soundscapes, points out that a glacier lagoon is actually a very noisy place. It's just a matter of how you listen to it.
Break that down for us. What are we actually hearing?
Well, above the water, you have the macro sounds. You have the wind, the rhythmic waves slapping the ice, and then the violent sounds, the really loud crack and groan of the ice calving.
That's entropy in action, the ice literally breaking apart.
Right. But underwater, that is where it gets mysterious. The hydrophone recordings pick up this delicate tinkling, bubbling, and fizzing.
Fizzing, like a can of soda.
Just like that. It's the sound of that ancient air, those tiny bubbles that were trapped hundreds of years ago, finally escaping as the ice melts.
Wow.
It's a constant, subtle soundtrack of the ice returning to water. It's literally the sound of the archive opening.
That is so poetic. And that melting process leads to one of the most striking images in our stack, the Diamond Beach.
Reisemerkersonder.
Yeah. This is where those icebergs wash up on the black sand. The production brief called it a ghost story, written in water.
That is beautiful, and it really captures the fleeting nature of it, because you have the black sand, which, remember, was created by the fire,
Yeah.
and the white and blue ice resting on it for just a brief moment before the ocean takes it away.
It's a snapshot of the entire geological cycle in one spot.
It really is.
But let's talk about that black sand for a second, because the sand didn't just magically appear. That brings us to chapter 3. Wind.
The sculptor.
I thought I knew what wind was, but the Icelandic language seems to have a lot of specific words for bad weather.
They do. And there's one specific term mentioned in the sources that we have to talk about. Slagvidir.
Slagvidir, which translates to what exactly?
Hitting weather.
That sounds aggressive.
It's very literal. It describes wind so strong and rain so hard that it feels like you are physically being punched.
Man.
But this wind is what grinds the volcanic rock down. It smashes the basalt columns against each other over and over until they turn into that famous black sand. The wind is the actual architect of the beach.
But it's an architect that you have to be very careful around. The sources are extremely clear about the danger at places like Reynisfjara, the black sand beach near Vik.
This is a critical safety note for anyone listening who might actually go there. We talk about sneaker waves, and I honestly think the name does it a disservice. It sounds cute.
Yeah, like a wave that just tiptoes up on you.
It's not cute at all. It's deadly. The physics of the beach at Reynisfjara are unique. The ocean floor drops off very steeply right at the shore, so the waves don't lose their energy before they hit the sand.
And the rhythm is deceptive, right?
Exactly. You'll have a rhythm of smaller waves. 1, 2, 3, and you think, okay, this is the safe line. I can stand here to take a picture.
Right.
And then without any warning, a wave combines with the energy of the ones behind it and surges 10, 20 meters further up the beach.
And because it's on gravel and sand, the retreat is incredibly powerful. It just drags you out.
It drags you into freezing, turbulent water where rescue is almost impossible. It catches people off guard constantly.
And looking at our 2026 update in the source material, the landscape there is changing fast.
It is. Recent storms and persistent easterly winds have caused significant erosion at Reynes Fujara. The sand has been completely stripped away in places, revealing steep cliffs underneath that haven't been seen in years.
It's a reminder that the sculpting isn't finished, it's happening right now. But then there is the element that dictates time itself. Light, Chapter 4.
The celestial interface. Iceland is a place of absolute extreme oscillation when it comes to light. It is all or nothing.
Let's talk about those extremes, because if you visit in December versus visiting in June, you are effectively visiting two different planets.
You really are. In the winter, say, around the solstice on December 21st, Reykjavik gets only about 4 hours of daylight.
Wow.
And even that daylight isn't what we're used to. The sun only climbs about 2 or 3 degrees above the horizon.
So it creates that permanent blue hour vibe.
Yes. It's basically a 4-hour sunrise that goes straight into a sunset.
Yeah.
It's moody, it's very atmospheric, but it can be psychologically heavy. The sources talk extensively about the need for light therapy lamps and heavy vitamin D supplements.
But then, flip the calendar to summer, the midnight sun.
Late May to July. The sun dips just below the horizon, but it never actually gets dark. It's civil twilight all night long.
The photographers in our source material go crazy for this. They talk about the golden hour. Usually that lasts maybe 30 minutes anywhere else in the world.
Right, you have to rush to get the perfect shot.
Right.
But in Iceland, in the summer, the golden hour lasts for 4 hours, from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m.
That's incredible.
The light just skims the landscape the entire time. It's surreal.
But I do have to bust a myth here because one of our sources was very specific about this. I always thought midnight sun meant the sun literally stays up in the sky.
Ah, the land of the midnight sun marketing.
Exactly.
Technically, in Reykjavik, the sun does set. It goes below the horizon. It just doesn't get dark enough to see the stars.
Yeah.
The only place in Iceland where you get true 24-hour sunlight, where the sun actually circles the sky without setting, is Grimsey Island.
That's the tiny island way up in the north.
Right. It's the only part of Iceland that actually touches the Arctic Circle.
Okay, so we have the endless day, but we are in February 2026 right now, which means we still have darkness. And darkness means northern lights.
The aurora borealis. And this is where the timing of our deep dive is so important. We mentioned the solar maximum earlier.
Right, which means the sun is super active.
Very active. The sun goes through an 11-year cycle, and we are at the peak right now.
Meaning more sunspots.
More sunspots, more solar flares hurling particles toward Earth. This is the best time in over a decade for sightings.
I've always wondered about the colors. You see the photos, green, pink, sometimes red. What actually dictates that? Is it the speed of the particles?
It's actually chemistry. It depends on what gas the solar particles are slamming into in our upper atmosphere and at what altitude that collision happens.
Okay, let's break it down. Green.
That's oxygen. Specifically, oxygen at lower altitudes, about 100 to 300 kilometers up. That's the most common color because that's where most of the collisions happen.
And the red, because that seems much rarer.
It is. That is also oxygen, but at much higher altitudes, above 300 kilometers. The air is thinner up there, so the chemical reaction is slightly different.
And the purple or blue, I've seen that in some of the high-res photos in the stats.
That's nitrogen. And that usually happens at lower altitude. So when you look up at the aurora, you are essentially looking at a giant neon sign where the gas inside the tube is the atmosphere itself.
That's a great way to picture it. There was one other phenomenon mentioned in the sources that I had never even heard of, something called Steve.
Ah, yes.
Steve.
Please tell me that that stands for something scientific.
It does. Strong thermal emission velocity enhancement.
Catchy.
It is. But it's distinct from the normal aurora. It looks like a purple arc, often with this green picket fence structure underneath it.
And it's a relatively new discovery, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. It wasn't even formally recognized by scientists until relatively recently, mostly because citizen scientists and photographers just kept taking pictures of it and asking, what is this?
It really shows just how much we're still learning about our interaction with space weather.
It connects back to that idea of the celestial interface. You are standing on a rock in the ocean, looking up at a magnetic storm protecting you from the sun. It definitely puts things in perspective.
So what does this all mean for us? We've got these four elements: fire, ice, wind, and light, all dialed up to 11.
I think it comes back to that liminal state mentioned in the mission statement. Iceland forces you into the present moment.
You can't ignore it.
No, you can't be distracted or scrolling on your phone when the wind is trying to knock you over, or the smell of sulfur is in your nose, or the light is doing something impossible in the sky.
It demands your attention.
It does. And it forces a kind of humility.
Yeah.
You are small. The landscape is big.